like to welcome our panellists here as well. I think they're going to just quickly go down and introduce themselves. So start with Rebecca.
Hello, I'm Rebecca Brand. I'm the director of The Campaigner, the short film you saw second tonight. Joyce is actually my grandma, I should confess. She's pretty cool. That film we made in 2012. Cinematographer Daniela Shazari is here this evening as well. We're currently working on a feature documentary now, which is about role models for girls.
Hello. Hi, I'm Clare. I directed To Hear Her Voice, the film at Suffragette Theatre. And I'm a filmmaker, and I work with a production company. Well, I have a production company with two others in Manchester called Picture Show Productions, and I'm currently in pre-production for 2 different documentaries, as well as lots of other more abstract and artistic sort of films and things like that.
My name is Helen Dixon. I'm not a filmmaker, but I was involved in the writing of the television program that the film was about. I'm also a feminist activist. I co-founded a feminist education and communications collective in the north of Nicaragua. So part of the reason why I got involved in the program was because of my involvement in the feminist movement. So it's very much part of my passion. And I've been in Britain for a couple of years now, after having been 23 years in Nicaragua. So I'm sort of learning to adapt. But very proud to show some of the work that we've done there, and I'd maybe talk a little bit more about the context around it. So.
Hello, my name is Veronica. I co-directed this short film about the Food for Love event. I'm also part of the organization who organized the event. It's called the Dégommeuse. It's a football team, but it's also a small organization who works, who fight against discrimination and specifically lesbophobia in sport and through sports. So we invited this team to France, and it was the opportunity to organize a whole week of actions against lesbophobia, in particular focusing on the problem of hate crimes in South Africa, of course, as you know, this reality. And currently we are producing a documentary about the Thokozani Football Club in South Africa. So there is one of the girls that you saw on screen with a small, I don't know how you say, hat, like this, hairdressing up. She's a filmmaker, and she now she turned she showed some images in Durban, where the Thokozani Football Club live and plays, and we invited her to Paris to do the editing of the film.
Hello, my name is Elise, and I was involved in the making of the same movie as Veronica, except that I'm not part of the organization first. She just asked me if I can edit. She said, "Can you edit video?" And I said, yeah. So I joined the project later, and we co-write the movie because first, I don't know if there was intended to do really a movie. It was we were supposed to collect the images and try to make a short clip to show what was about the week when the Thokozani Football Club was in Paris. And in the end, we make this movie of 12 minutes. Like, I don't know exactly where it comes from. I don't know. We just editing room, 12 hours and stuff like that. So I'm here. It's like kind of a hazard.
Thanks so much. I forgot to introduce myself. My name is Nicola Chang, and I'm volunteering this year at the festival, and I wanted to chair. It's my first time, so please be patient with me, I'm a bit nervous. I've just started a master's at Birkbeck College in Latin American Cultural Studies, and I like film and feminism, so that's it. I thought I would start with a kind of broad question to warm you guys up. And I thought all your films are all about feminist activism in one way or another. And I just wanted to see to what extent do you think filmmaking in itself is a form of activism? Who wants to start?
For me, it's quite easy to answer. That's why I start off. Because the Thokozani Football Club was founded by Zanele Muholi, who is a South African photographer. She appeared on the screen. And all her work is about documenting. So all her work is about visual activism, as she says. So she takes pictures, she does film, and at the same time she documents the story of those black lesbians who is quite unknown, who is quite hidden. So I think that we are not, of course, at her level, but at our small level, we think that making films, or even, as she said, it's not making a film, but it was just documenting, turning some images, shooting some images, was already a form of activism as you organize it and you show it in a proper way.
I'd like to talk about that because I think one of the most important things about any form of media, whether it be film, television, radio, I've also been involved in doing storytelling through radio, but I think allows us to sort of break through from the intimate, sort of private places where we often silence a lot of what happens to us, and really put that right into the public sphere. And I think that's a very political act. And I think even if you're not doing something as ambitious as this television program, which is obviously quite expensive, and there's all sorts of things to talk about that, but even on a small scale, I think that that's very important, and then that becomes an instrument for feminist organizations to be able to use that and examine it and use it in workshops and use it for campaigns and in all sorts of different ways. So I think it sort of goes back and forward in that sense, and I think without media work, I think we wouldn't have the same ability to reach people, perhaps, that otherwise we might not be able to reach. So I think any kind of media is very, very important in terms of just broadening out the sort of scope of where we can touch and making sure that those silences and those invisibilities don't remain where they are, and they really do transcend.
Yeah, I'm nodding along because that's kind of one of my things as well. I think that through media, through lots of different forms of media, and obviously watching the film at the TV program was amazing, because to see something that has that reach with a kind of goal and a political goal and a social goal as well, I suppose. We very, very rarely have that now in TV or in lots of other forms of media, in my opinion. And I think that, I suppose my thing is kind of filling in the gaps of history. So that's what I think. Things that are invisible, things that we don't know about, that we don't talk about, that we don't we don't discuss sometimes because it's not socially acceptable, but also because we don't know. And so one of the things, I suppose, for me making, because I like documentaries and I like history, a bit like Naomi says in the film, I like history and I like film and theatre, so I'm going to try and put those together, and that's where I think hopefully you can show people things that they don't know that have happened and are there, but people they don't realise.
Yeah, I completely agree as well with what everyone said. I guess, I think the thing about film is, as a form of storytelling, it's a way, stories are a way into often very difficult issues for people, and I particularly feel with kind of comedy, for example, is, you can make really serious points, and it's kind of, you catch people off their guard in a way, and I think, film has great potential to do that, and again, we saw that in, I think, your film in particular.
Cool. And it seems to be with some of these films, it is necessary for them to be complemented with this kind of social action around films, like in the Bed and in Foot for Love. So I was just wondering, in terms of your organisation or the Foot for Love, how do they raise awareness about homophobia and about hate crimes? What else do you do with your Les Dégommeuses? And if you want, maybe give us a little bit of history behind the name, what it means, what translation would be.
Yeah, Les Dégommeuses, sweepers. We said that it was a good translation. That means in sports, it means killing the other team, but of course in an ironic way, because we are a very bad team, and that's why we chose this very scary name, in fact. But it's also a way of saying that we want to sweep off the discrimination. As I said, the link was because we knew Zanele Muvoye, so we organized this Food for Love week, and it was the match that you see in the documentary, in the film, at the Parc des Princes, which is like a Wembley Stadium in Paris. So it was really important for those girls to play in an important place, because I think that the spirit of all this project was to give them the opportunity to not to appear as victims, but as football players, as great football players, and of course at the same time to raise awareness about their reality. But we did not only sport things, but we had a picture exhibition, we had some meetings with young people who also were discriminated for other reasons, for racism, etc., so that they could get together, because sports was also a way for them to be empowered and to take action on their lives. And so this is a part of our activity, and the other activity is not about South Africa, but it's more like raising awareness about lesbophobia in France. So we work locally, trying to meet other teams, trying to, and also about, not only about lesbophobia, but also more generally about sexism, because it's, as you know, in a masculine sport like football, it's a very big concern.
Okay, yeah, so but you were raising a point about racism, and I think it brings to light the idea about intersectionality and how we need to be aware of all different kinds of oppression. And I thought that was really well raised in To Hear Her Voice, when it's not just about women, and it's also about class. I think this is great for, in terms of the film industry. It seems to be the most sexist industry at the moment. Yeah, basically I was reading today about some stuff, and in Hollywood, there's only been one female winner of director of the Academy Award Oscar in the whole of history, and I just thought it's very pertinent to what we're doing here at the film festival. I don't know do you have any ideas about how we might be able to encourage women in the film industry? Events like this, of course, other women-only film festivals.
Well, I worked for 5 years for Women in Film and Television in the UK, which is an organisation, it's an international network. It's an organisation that supports women that work in the film and TV industries. And I think you're absolutely right in what you say about we've got a long way to go on gender behind the scenes in the industry and on screen as well. In the UK, it's around, I think, 12% of screenwriters are women. Currently, about 9% directors, and those statistics sort of haven't changed as time's gone by. So there's certainly a lot to do. One of the things that Women in Film and Television is doing, for example, is they have a mentoring scheme. I think mentoring is hugely important for all there's a diversity problem across the board. It's not just gender diversity. So mentoring, I think, is really important. And also, I think, we have a lot to do ourselves as women. Like the fact that you've wanted to chair this panel this evening, and you were nervous to do it. It was the first time you're doing it. You're doing a really good job, and the fact that you've done it is really good. And I think as women, we have a responsibility as well to take those steps. So it's that's 1, 2, 3.
I think another thing that's really important too is that even though in this case I was working on a fairly sort of large scale project. There was a couple of things that I think are really important to point out. One is the very conscious effort to make sure that that women have access to the jobs on all levels, right? So that they're writing, they're in all of the production levels, and all of those jobs are valued. And the fact that there are women doing those jobs is also valued. So I think that's one part of it. But the other part of it, I think, is also the importance of doing small-scale work. Because the whole issue of access, it's very difficult sometimes for people to have access to do, large-scale mass media kind of stuff. But I think it's really important to invest in small-scale projects where women gain confidence, work on things, bring out points of view that then you realise how original they are. Because the mass media is dominated by the industry. the effort to kind of piece together a world made sort of from small scale things that then join together, then we are creating our own world bit by bit. And I think a lot of the time local level work is not appreciated as much as it should be. And I think when we think about creating movement, especially feminist movement, it starts at local levels. It joins up local levels. We don't have to have these kind of monolithic projects to be able to really make that happen. So I think that's another way to encourage it. It's just getting women to pick up cameras or to do photographic stuff and get young women to think about, you know, writing fiction out of stories that are there. You know, all of that storytelling, I think, makes a huge difference and makes us more visible and more confident.
I don't know the situation of the movie business in England, but I'm working in France, not as an editor, but as a location manager on shootings, and accurate, but also wrong. I'm sorry, I don't mean to say that like that. It's just that my English is not that fluent. So when I work, most of the time on the movie teams, there is half women, half men. There is no more men than women in techniques. I have lots of friends, girlfriends, who are really talented assistant directors or assistant cinematographer and or boom operators, or at every position you can find women with knowledge and talent. Yeah. So I think the problem is more endorsement and money. The fact that producers are mostly men, they have the money and they get the endorsement for the project of other men. And when a woman comes with a project was totally fine, totally realistic, most of the time she can't find the money where a man could. So I think it's more, the problem is more this, and I think we need to create links, connection, and support to find money to support the projects of other women.
That's, in terms of the UK film industry, it's really interesting because I think there's quite a disparity, because over here, statistics anyway suggest that there is definitely a lack of women in the technical roles. Like in sound, it's something like 2%, camera something like 4%. It's very, very low. That's looking at feature films. I think it is a bit different in short films. There seems to be a lot more women working across the different crafts. And also in terms of funding, I mean, if we look at the public funders in the UK, those gatekeepers are mainly women. Christine Langan at BBC Films, we've got Tessa Ross, I think, at Film for. It's now a man at the BFI, but it used to be Tanya Sagachin. But even so, like, even though you have those women in those key decision-making roles, we're still not seeing the female directors coming through. I think the stats are probably slightly better in the publicly funded features realm, but I don't know. Here it seems like it's a different, yeah.
Yeah, it certainly sounds quite a different scenario, I think. And I was reading about that as well recently, about that move from short film and from what you're talking about. And I think, because I do some work at the University Master Metropolitan in Manchester as well, on the MA programme there, and it's amazing that the majority of students who've come through that MA programme in the last few years have been women, far more than men, to get an MA in filmmaking. And I think in the independent industry, in the short film industry, and at grassroots, there are loads of women, but for some reason, and I think what you've said is definitely true in terms of funding. But then obviously we've got women providing funding too, but there is something stopping them from moving into feature and higher paid and bigger budget projects. And I don't know what that is actually. I think part of it is probably who controls the purse strings, but again, then we're talking about production companies, and I would imagine whereas the public funding maybe is at least half and half, or even maybe possibly more women, the production companies aren't, and especially the major production companies. And there are some which are run by women or led by women, but it's quite rare. Certainly from what I've seen, that's totally anecdotal. I've got no statistics about that.
Yeah, and also I should clarify that I'm not particularly talking about Europe, and I was thinking about male domination of the media as well, because I can remember when I went to Nicaragua in the 80s, and I had worked at a radio station before that, and I was doing my own production. I was doing the whole range, and when I got there, I was so shocked to find out there wasn't a single woman that did the technical controls in the radio stations. I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it was that exaggerated, I suppose. It was also because I had this idea that between feminism and revolution there was no contradiction, and I found out there was. But I sort of knew anyway, but I just went and proved it. But I do think that we have to name what it is that's stopping it. And it's called patriarchy. It's still there. It's part of the whole neoliberal counter-revolution, if you like. And I think that there's a reason why it's there. I think that we know information is power. We know that any kind of possibility for independent voice within any media at this point is very difficult. You come to Britain and, I think we're still in the wake of most of the media being owned by, one or two people. There's an incredible amount of sort of institutional control over messages and all of that. I can't believe it sometimes, having been outside of this country for 37 years or something, hearing Radio 4 and the sort of Home Office version of foreign news is quite shocking. So I think it's a very systemic thing. I think sometimes there's a kind of an illusion about how much freedom or how much equality actually exists. But if you really scratch the surface, I think it is very systemic. There is a systemic exclusion of women and women's voices, and any kind of critical or feminist visions, particularly, because it's not really a essentialist problem. I think it is a systemic problem, and then because of that, we need to think about other ways to do it within this world that's there, but also outside of it to pressure it. And that's why I'm talking about the local and small-scale stuff, as well as trying to intervene in the sort of large-scale spaces.
I'm going to open up for questions now, so if anyone has anything they'd like to ask.
Hello.
Hi.
It's not actually a question, I want to comment on something. I did my research for my MA about women in the UK media industry, and I found out that the main obstacle is not really patriarchy, but rather domestic responsibilities, and given birth, it's very difficult for women to progress in their careers after they have a maternity leave. So I don't know, maybe you have any ideas on this issue. Thank you.
I think that probably has a lot to do with the fact that there's so many freelancers, and you kind of don't really get many rights as a freelancer. And my understanding of the way the industry's changed in the last decade or so is that more and more people have moved to be freelance, or have been forced to go freelance. And I was at a debate that took place at BAFTA a couple of years ago, and somebody joked that everyone ends up going to Channel 4 when they want to start a family, because you get maternity leave and you actually get paid. So there's I think you're absolutely right. There's a huge problem, and I think it's when you're a freelancer you don't have those kinds of rights. So what on earth can you do?
Yeah, I think that's quite clearly linked to a patriarchy for me. If there isn't an understanding within the industry that women will have children, which quite a few will, and that will take some time, and might take some time out of their working schedule, then obviously that's going to create a big problem. And there needs to be a more understanding system in terms of that event happening.
I think on that note, actually, like the working conditions for everyone in the industry are terrible, and I think it's worse for women because of the role that women often play, that to kind of take on the main responsibility of having kids. But actually, working conditions across the board are pretty shit, really. You work really long hours for not particularly good pay. You're asked to drop everything to maybe film for 3 months, then you don't know where your next job might be coming from. So I think it's probably a problem across the industry, which affects women disproportionately. But I mean, I think we should, there's an argument that if people actually, it's not just a women's issue, this is an issue that affects everyone in the industry, so we've got a better chance if everyone stood together on it that something might change.
Yeah, I've got a mic.
I just have a question. I'm sorry, I'm terrible with names. The lovely lady in the purple scarf, which is very lovely. I think I'm interested in your perspective, having had a connection with the feminist movement for a long time, and then moving to Central America, and just thinking kind of contextually and culturally that a focus on changing masculinities and a focus on the importance of that has actually been for a long time quite a controversial focus for the feminist movement. And I wondered if your experience there was more open to that than perhaps it would have been in Europe, or whether you see that changing kind of globally. From all my reading and experience is that in Central America these things are quite common now, and there's a big push to these types of focuses. But I just wonder what the contrast has been in your own experience.
That is actually a really fairly lengthy and complex discussion. I think the first thing for me as a feminist, and I'm not speaking for Puntos de Encuentro, which is a large NGO that has done this project that I worked with, but my own personal sense of it is that it's very important in any social movement to ensure that there is a strengthened subject that takes on a protagonist role against the sort of systemic unbalance that they're fighting against. In other words, in an anti-racist movement, I have to be there as a white woman, but it's very, very important that my protagonism doesn't substitute for somebody else's. So that's one thing. The other thing is, the context of Nicaragua is bathed in international aid money, and it has been ever since 1979. And sometimes that's fantastic because you do like hugely ambitious projects like this, because it wouldn't be possible without development aid money. However, it also means that the aid agencies can introduce their favourite topics. And one of their favourite topics right now, surprise, surprise, is masculinity. So I'm a bit cynical at this point after having lived, like a quarter of a century in Nicaragua and having seen all of the problems that then creates. I'm maybe not, at the same time, I know a good small group of very sincere men who've taken the whole issue of male identity through themselves and through especially their sexuality. And I think part of the problem that we have is the masculinity discourse, if it doesn't really go through a process where men take it inside of themselves and especially touch on their sexuality, which I think is one of the central places where identity is constructed, and especially gendered identities, and all of these binaries that we face. If it's not taken through that, then sometimes what happens is there's a kind of more superficial discourse, but actually the substantial change isn't necessarily happening. So I'm somewhat wary of the masculinity discourse, and at the same time, to the extent by which men take it on and form spaces and are there with us, I think that's great. The only thing I worry about at this point is that a lot of the aid money now is getting reduced for feminist projects and is going up for masculinity projects. So, you really need to kind of take in the whole picture to be able to talk about it. But I think there's a huge political discussion still about this, because also there's the issue of, we're living in our past, the past present. In other words, there's this thing called women, right? There's this kind of, that has been imposed on us as a uniform identity that we're trying to change to become ourselves without gender. I mean, I'm in favour of abolishing gender. But in order to abolish gender, we have to call ourselves together based on what's been imposed on us. And in that place, between the future present and the past present, you know, where we need to think about, okay, so where do men who've been named as men come into that picture? But I do think it's a very complex political issue that requires, you know, huge amounts of time to discuss.
Yeah, you first, sorry.
Hi, so I'm Nikki, I'm from South Africa, and it was really great to see the geographical diversity in the films. I'm really interested in the motivations of people to be involved in these issues in the first place, so maybe slightly cliche, but I'd be really interested, given the fact that all of you are here, to hear a little bit about what was it that motivated you to look at that particular subject matter, and to take a particular angle that you did on it.
Sure. Hey, so as I said earlier, Joyce is actually my grandmother. I'm very fortunate to have her in the family, and I've known for a few years that she'd been involved with campaigning, and what she didn't mention when she said that she defaced public buildings, that it was with obscenities. And what happened back in 2012, I was babysitting my cousins, and they said, "Oh, have you seen that clip of Grandma on YouTube?" No. And there's a clip of her disrupting the council meeting, which she refers to, on YouTube, and I just thought it was so excellent, and we've been really proud of her in the family for a long time. So I thought it'd be great to make a short film about her. And actually, I asked her before I came this evening whether she wanted to kind of me to convey anything on her behalf about why she does what she does. So she has sent me a little note, which I will read out if it's appropriate. So she says, "As you'll remember from our day together, I could write a thesis on the subject of activism. However, there are two major aspects of being an active participant in our world. The first may seem a bit corny, but I think it underpins the need to be active. For evil to triumph, it is necessary only that good women do nothing. I was much influenced also by a marvellous social worker, Eileen Younghusband, who said, 'My dearest wish is that I should be truly alive when I die.' How could we hope to have such a wish granted if we opted for being passive in later life?"
So my motivation is quite easy to explain, I suppose. My background is in theatre, and more recently in the last few years, making films as well. So that's where the theatre thing comes from. And then I suppose having worked in theatre and seen how difficult it is to find pieces of theatre that I can identify with and that speak to me, that I could cast great roles for women in. Very, very, very difficult to find them, particularly published. And actually some of these plays have been published, and that was what was really interesting to me when I started to do the research, was that the work is out there. I think I said that earlier anyway. But it does exist, it is there, and it's even published for us. It's not really that hard to find, but yet we don't know where it is, and we don't know how to find it, and we don't know that it exists in a lot of cases. So for me, I suppose it's mostly about getting that information out there, and I think that there is a part, also touches on what we said earlier as well, about what we can do to improve the situation of women in film and media. And I think there's a huge element of role models and mentoring and the things that people have mentioned. But also it's very, very important to show women that women have been doing this for ages, and that there are women working there, and that there are women directors and women writers. And as Naomi says in the film, that you're not starting from scratch, and we kind of do think sometimes, oh God, I've got to do all this as a woman, and it's so hard, and there's so little of it happening. But there's actually a lot happening and has happened, and if we can kind of draw on that, it'll help us.
Just a brief word from Veronica about your motivations, and then I think we've got to wrap up. Sorry.
About the project? About the project, perhaps we should ask Cecile, who is up there, who is the president of the organization, and she really initiated this project. About the personal motivation, I think it's very simple. I think that we are still a minority who is discriminated as lesbians, And we saw last year in France these huge demonstrations against LGBT's rights. So this is very concrete motivation. And then I think that this question of solidarity, relation with other lesbians all around the world is not. You really have. I really be careful about that, but because it's not to say, oh, we are fine, we are good, we are wonderful, and those poor people there, they are so bad, they feel so great discrimination, poor them. Of course, they feel an incredible discrimination, which is very brutal, and the level of discrimination is very high. But for us, meeting them was really an opportunity to ask ourselves some questions, and also to ask the question about intersectionality, because they are black lesbians. We are a mixed team, but mostly white. And through this project, we attracted some black girls. And so this is very important for us, that the questioning was both sides and not only one side.
Thank you. Well, I think that's all we've got time for, so I could ask you to join me in thanking the panelists and directors.